Alright, so you may be wondering where we are right now, and well, after 2 weeks of multiple health screens and asking everyone to quarantine, I surprised my closest inner circle with a trip to a private island where we could pretend where things were normal just for a brief moment in time. Not just kidding, I'm also quarantined, as you guys know, and so this is going to be the makeshift classroom slash studio for a couple episodes, hopefully just a few. Yeah, I've been living in my office here and sleeping on the futon back there. I'm just looking forward to some good old-fashioned distance learning. Let's start the lesson before I get too depressed. Alright, I guess that meme's like officially dead now that like old teachers are using it in their lessons and such, so rest in peace to a funny moment in time there where we could all laugh at the Kardashians together. Anyways, if you remember from our last lesson, okay, you can link to it right there. We talked about the history, it was a very brief history, of the religion of Islam. And just to review a few key terms that were introduced in that lesson, the first one is Islam. Islam is the name of the religion, and it means submission. If you are a follower of Islam, then you are what we would call a Muslim, and the word Muslim means submitter to Allah. And if you don't know who Allah is, that is the name for the Muslim God. This entire religion was begun and founded by a man who claims to be Allah's last and greatest prophet, and that was the man Muhammad. Now if you're saying, whoa Mr. Peterson, slow down, that's a lot of info. Where are you getting all of this? Well, first off, a lot of it's in your textbook. But your textbook gets all that information from records of the Muslim holy book, the Qur'an. The word Qur'an means recitations, and a lot of the Qur'an claims to be transcribed recitations from the angel Gabriel as he visited the Prophet Muhammad in his cave outside of Mecca. You'll find that many of the teachings in the Qur'an actually reflect Jewish and Christian teachings, as Muhammad was likely influenced by the Christian and by the Jewish religions through his travels. Symptoms? In fact, many of the Old Testament characters that we know from the Bible are also honored in the Quran as earlier versions of the prophets that were sent by Allah to claim the monotheistic religion. You'll remember that Islam is another major monotheistic, that means worships one God, was another major monotheistic religion here in the world. In fact, that's what made Islam rejected by the people who live in Mecca, was the fact that it went against their polytheistic, idolatrous ways. And that was going to cut in on their bottom line, as they had temple worship and idol making factory people, idol makers, idolaters, I don't know what you call them. So obviously any of these biblical characters that were referenced in the Quran, even in a good way, were done so from a different perspective, and that was through a Muslim perspective. In fact, even Jesus Christ himself is mentioned in the Quran as one of the great prophets. However, the last and greatest prophet, according to the Quran, was the Prophet Muhammad. He was the one who received the final words from Allah through the angel Gabriel, and those were written down in the recitations, which, as you already know, means Quran. There are also similar themes in the Quran as you would find in the Bible or in other religious texts. The Quran and Allah place a high value on prayer. Themes like moral uprightness are also found throughout the teachings of the Quran as well. Probably the teachings or the themes that would tie it most in with Christian and Jewish texts would be the prophecy of the coming judgment by the monotheistic God Allah over the entire world. Also, so this episode, like our history of Islam, is not going to be a super descriptive, systematic theology of the Quran and of the Islamic teachings. But we are going to look at the 5 pillars. And the 5 pillars are found throughout the Quran, and they're 5 things that every Muslim strives to do. These 5 pillars all have Arabic names, but I'm not really going to mess with those too much because I'll probably just mispronounce them and offend people who actually are Muslim. If any of them are watching, probably not at this point. Alright, the first of the 5 pillars is that every Muslim must proclaim that there is only one God, and his name is Allah. And they also must proclaim that Muhammad was the greatest prophet of Allah. That is foundational to Islamic teachings. Now, you've probably seen the second of the 5 pillars in movies, television shows, or even just reports on Islam in general. Alright, and that is that every Muslim is expected to pray 5 times a day. And these prayers have to come at a certain time, and when you're praying, you have to be facing the city of Mecca because that's the center of the Islamic religion. Mecca is east of here, so we're looking, we'd be praying that way. Bang, over there. The third of the 5 pillars has to do with a Muslim's treatment of those who are less fortunate than him, even those that are less fortunate than him as Muslims. And that is the giving of alms to the poor. That's a very old-timey term, the giving of alms, but basically just means charity towards people that have less than you. The 4th pillar of Islam is probably another one that is well known to many non-Muslims, but that is the fast that every Muslim must go through during the month of Ramadan. During the daylight hours from sun up to sundown, Muslims are expected to only consume water, and then they can eat once the sun goes down for the entire month. The fifth and final pillar of Islam is probably the hardest one to do for many people, and that is something called the Hajj. And the Hajj is a pilgrimage to Mecca. If you are financially able, the Quran demands that all Muslims take time to visit the holy city of Mecca. During this time in Mecca, there are festivals, there are different things for the Muslims to go to show their devotion. You would visit the Kaaba, which has now been converted into an Islamic holy site. Walk around the Kaaba, worship, all these different things. Pray in Mecca, pray. How do you face Mecca if you're in Mecca? Anyways, those are the 5 pillars of Islam. They're taught all throughout the Quran, and it's something that all Muslims hold to. Another thing when talking about like the religion and teachings of Islam, it's important to note too that after the death of Muhammad, you'll remember there was some confusion about who should be the next leader of Islam. And this is where we get our first division in this young religion here in world history. And 2 groups emerged, the Sunni and the Shia. And there's so many differences between the Sunni and the Shia Muslims. I'm not going to try to explain them as a non-Muslim, but the founding disagreement was on who would actually follow Muhammad as the teacher. The Sunnis wanted one group, the Shias wanted other people. Some refer to their leaders as caliphs, and that was the one obviously that won out. Others refer to their leaders as imams, which is another term you've probably heard of if you have any dealings with Muslim people at all. But you have your Sunnis and your Shias. Those are 2 different sects that have done different things throughout history. Some nations are more Sunni than Shia. Some are more Shia than Sunni. Either way, that is something that we do need to acknowledge when talking about the religion of Islam. All right, so now that we kind of have some of the Islamic teachings out of the way, let's look at how the religion of Islam has impacted the world. Because if you remember, with the Umayyads and the Abbasids, they actually controlled a lot of the world at one point in time. Even today, Islam is the fastest growing religion. So there are a large number of Muslims in the world. How does that impact the culture? In history, as the Umayyad and the Abbasid caliphates are conquering, they're taking over and subjugating lots of different peoples, and these people are becoming part of the Islamic empire. Many of them are converting to Islam. While this is happening, you also have the absorption of that culture into Muslim culture. You have the absorption of that knowledge into Muslim knowledge as well. And so one thing that the Muslims did was they preserved a lot of different academic research, a lot of different cultural artifacts, and absorbed them into their culture for later Western scholars to intersect with and rediscover. You're probably thinking, what did he just say? Absorption and rediscovering of scholarly work. Well, basically, a lot of the world was shut off to non-Muslims at the time during the Umayyad and the Abbasid caliphates. Once the Crusades happened, it reintroduces Western Europe into lots of the things that were preserved by the Muslims. These things included classical Greek literature that was translated into Arabic. This had to do with the mathematical achievements of Egypt and India, the astronomical studies of other different cultures. These are all rediscovered by Western people after the Crusades and as these 2 cultures collide with each other. A lot of these teachings indirectly lead to a renaissance in Europe. Maybe you're asking, hey, Mr. Peterson, you got any names that you could give us, like, about these Muslims? I do have names for you, children. The first one is a guy by the name of Al-Razi. And Al-Razi was a Muslim doctor. He was a medical scientist. And Al-Razi was greatly influential in the furthering of the medical studies. Another Muslim scholar that had a lot to do with medicine was a guy by the name of Ibn Sina. And Ibn Sina was a revolutionary doctor that talked about lots of different things. He actually wrote a few different books. His specialty, I believe, was the eye, and he actually performed surgeries on people's eyes, removing cataracts and stuff, which is pretty impressive considering no modern technology for that. But guys like Al-Razi and Ibn Sina contributed greatly to the field of medicine in the name of Muslim scholarship. Another name that you might want to be familiar with was a guy by the name of Omar Khayyam. And Omar Khayyam contributed to Muslim literature. Probably his greatest contribution was a type of poetry called the Rubaiyat. And the Rubaiyat was a type of poetry that had a certain number of lines, kind of like a haiku or a sinkain that you would have here in English literature. The Rubaiyat was developed by Khayyam, and it was very influential in Islamic and then eventually Western literature as well. Islamic scholars borrowed from many different cultures that they conquered, and their study of mathematics and geometry especially was second to none. So they made some great strides forward as they absorbed the cultures of like the Hindu mathematics and Egyptian astronomy and things like that. That led to lots of Muslim scholarship in the field of mathematics. Art and architecture were also furthered under the Muslim empires. One major form of art is calligraphy. In fact, any of the Muslim writing that you see from the time in the past or even now is very ornate and very beautiful. That calligraphy originates in their culture. And then as far as architecture goes, many mosques, which is the Muslim temple, temple or the Muslim worship center. Many of these mosques were built all throughout the Umayyad and the Abbasid Caliphate, and then today anywhere where Muslims live. And these mosques are typically very distinct in their structure and in their shape. Lots of this was pioneered by the Islamic people. That's it. We're there. We're done. We're done talking about the influence in the culture. Obviously, we could go on forever about the influence of the Islamic empires, but that's what we have for today. So make sure you know about Muhammad and the history of these Muslim empires, as well as their impact in culture and their teachings of their holy book, the Quran. I enjoyed it from my office. The next video will probably be from my office. But either way, until we're back in the classroom together, be always learning. We'll check you next time. The battery on my camera is really low. Like and subscribe. Bye.